Hi, I'm Joel from Agility, and today we're going to be talking about content relationships. And specifically with Agility, content relationships refers to linked content fields. Now, in our previous video, we talked about regular content where we have a model that defines the fields for a container, which has content items that are in it. When we talk about linked content, we can talk about how models are going to relate to each other. So we can have shared linked content where we have a child model and a parent model. This works for some things like when maybe we have a model that describes an article, and that article could have linked to one category, it could have linked to an author, and it could have linked to many tags. So in this video, we'll take you through how to actually create that inside Agility, inside the modeling section, and show you what that looks like in terms of the editing experience. And then we'll look at the other kind of linked content where we have nested content, where you have a parent model that contains a nested model. And this is useful for something like if I have like a carousel, an image carousel, where every time I create a carousel, I want to have a new list of carousel items that is contained by that carousel item. So let's jump into Agility and we'll figure out how we can actually do this. So again, we're going to start from the modeling section, and you can see here we've got if we're looking at, we want to have a post or an article that is linked to a category, an author, and some tags. How can we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to create those child models, okay? So let's look at the category model. Very simple, it's got a title, and we've already created a list for this called blog categories, okay? So this is setting up a blog. It could be setting up other things as well. That's just this example. Let's look at the authors. So we've got on an author, we've got a name, a bio, and a headshot field, and we've got a list of authors. So when we're linking content together, it's important to create the containers ahead of time that you're going to need for the child items, okay? Which says that we should probably have a list of tags somewhere as well. So we've got a tag, which is very simple. It's just got a title. Then we've got a list of tags for that as well. All right, so now we've got our child content set up. Let's refer back to our diagram. It's always good to have a diagram to refer back to. We've got an article. In this case, it's actually, let's rename this. It's actually a post, blog post. Same difference. We have a category, an author, and a tags list. So we've created the list for those. Now we need to set up these relationships. So we want to have a one-to-one relationship with a category, an author, and a one-to-many relationship with the tags. All right, let's do that. So let's go into our post, and let's go ahead and add the field called linked content. All right, so here we go. It's a linked content field, and let's put that right underneath let's go right underneath the date. All right, so let's set up our category. Category, if I could spell, there you go. And we're going to call the field name category. That's fine. The field properties for linked content are pretty complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on. So in this case, we're setting up a shared content link. We're going to link to specific items from a list. And we only want one of these, so we're going to use a drop-down list. Remember, from our diagram, we only want one category. And we're going to use a specific content list in this case. So if we had many kinds of category lists that all follow the same model, we could use that there. But in this case, we're going to specifically only go to the categories list, blog categories list. We can choose which column we want to display. So we're going to use the title column. And we can actually, the way Agility stores this is we can save the value and the text into other fields that are also on this model. And I kind of cheated. I went ahead and not only did I create the child content, but I also created some fields in here. So we're going to see a field in here called category. So this is the category name that's going to be saved into here. And we're going to save the value to the category ID. Okay. It's important to take note of this to sort of understand where all that is. So we're going to update that. So we've got our category. Now we're going to do almost the exact same thing for the author field. So this should be pretty easy. We're going to create a field called author, shared content link. We're going to link to specific items from the list. It's a drop-down field because we only want one author. Right? We could have many authors, but in this case, we're specifically saying there's only one author. We're going to have a specific content list called authors. There it is. Right? The visible column is loading. Here we go. Visible column is going to be the name. The text field we're going to use is called author. The label is author. And we have an author ID field that we're going to store the value into, okay? It's important to store the value in the text there. We store the text field. It's really just to make it easy if we want to show that in a column in the listing. That's important to save. That's the only reason to sort of save the text field. The author ID field, that's the actual the field that's going to link these two items together. We're going to update that. So we've got our category, we've got our author. Now we just need to do our tags. So let's add one more field in here. We're going to call this tags. This is slightly different. It's still a shared content link. We're still linking to specific items from the list. But in this case, we're going to use a search list box. Now we have two options for selecting many, and I'm actually going to show both of them. Let's do a checkbox list first. All right, so this is a checkbox list probably doesn't make sense if I'm going to have like hundreds of tags, but if I only have a few, then this will show me all of the tags there. So let's see how that looks like. We're going to do a specific content list. We're going to call, and I think we called it tags. There we go. And the visible column we want to use is called title. We're going to save the text field. I think we've got our list here called tags, or our field tags for the text field. And we're going to use the tag IDs field to store the IDs. We have another option here of how many columns we want to use. Let's just set it at 1 for now. All right, so we're all set on this at this point. So now let's go take a look at the posts list that we already have to see what this looks like. All right. So let's go ahead and let's create a new blog post. All right, so we're going to give it a title, my blog post. Whatever, we'll give it a slug. That doesn't really matter. I'm really concerned about the linked content fields here. Let's choose the date, the post date. Maybe it's for yesterday or today. Doesn't really matter. Today, cool. Now, category. This is what this looks like for us when we're choosing a category. So I get a drop-down list where it's going to show me the categories that are in the list. And if I had lots of them, I could basically search for the one I want. So if I wanted, the one that says travel tips, I can go and find that. As I choose that now, hidden, I didn't show this, but in the previous model, I actually hid all the value fields. But this actually sets those fields in the background as I choose this. Let's do the same thing for the author. All right, so I have two authors in my list, Joel Vardy, John Voight, so let's choose me. And now the tags. So you can see I've got a choice of the tags here, red, green, or blue. I can choose them. So a checkbox list is really nice for multiple selection in this case because I only have 3 tags. But if I had like 300 tags, this might not be the best option. So we'll see how we can change that. This is also asking me to choose an asset for this. So I'm going to just very quickly go to the post list. And let's just see post folder. Just fill out the required fields on this. I have to type in this field. Okay, so this isn't a real blog post. This is just an example, but here we go. So now I can save that and it's all set up. So we're good. We're able to save all those values and it seems to work, okay? Now, what if I wanted to change how this worked a little bit for the tags list, okay? So a nice way that we can sort of, if we're a content architect and we're a developer and we're sort of working on this, we can actually go to the properties tab and open this content model. We can cheat a little bit and open this content model in a flyout, okay? So the first thing I want to do is actually change this tags, change the rendering type. So instead of rendering a checkbox list, let's choose something called a search list box. Okay, now it's the way the data is stored in the background is exactly the same. We haven't changed that, but we have changed how it's going to render for the user, okay? And now we get to choose the visible columns. So we're going to choose, if we had multiple columns, we could do that here, but we just want to use the title field. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to save that, and you'll see now this is going to change how this renders. So it's still going to have the same things chosen here, but it only shows me the ones that I've chosen. And if I want to choose more, I have to click the drop-down list and I can add those like that. And I can actually rearrange these if I want to, so I can drag and drop these. So it's a little bit different way of working with it, but if you have a long list that you're relating this to, that works really well for that. So that's how we set up linked content in Agility to relate content to other content lists that are within the content area, okay? Now, there was another way that I talked about, another way of relating content together, and that's called nested content. So let's look at how we can do that. And the example we want to look at here is a carousel. Now, this is a carousel. We're going to do a module for this instead of just a regular piece of shared content, which is going to basically be a component that's going to render in our front end, okay? So if I've got a design where there's like an image carousel and I have a list of carousel items and I want to use a different list of items every time you create a new carousel, this is for you. Here we go. So in the back to the modeling section, I'm going to make sure that I have a content model set up for my carousel item. And let's look at what that is. I've got a title on there so I can sort of name each item. And I've got an image. Let's actually add one more field onto here, and we're going to call it, it's going to be a URL field or a link field. And we're going to call that our CTA, which is marketing speak for call to action. All right, so we can actually now have like a title, an image, and a call to action on our slider. And that totally depends on your requirements, but I just thought it would be fun to show how we can do that here. So now we've got the model created that's going to be the nested content. Now, we do not need to create lists that will, or containers that will show up in our content area. We don't need to create those for a nested child content, okay? What we do need to create is the parent, all right? So we need to say, hey, where is this module component for our carousel? So let's jump into our page modules, and you can see I called it image carousel, right? And it has no fields on here yet. So let's go ahead and add our linked content field, linked content. Drop that in there. And we're going to call this, why don't we call this maybe items? Images could be another one, but items is fine for now. And this is now going to be a linking to nested content or child content, where this image carousel is going to contain a list of items. We get to choose the model. I'm going to choose the carousel item model. Notice I'm not selecting a container or a list here. I'm just saying what model is going to be used to create the list every time a new carousel is created. We're linking to a full list, so we're going to have multiple carousel items. We're going to show an embedded view of that list inside our component. And we get to choose which columns are rendered here. So I'm going to say I want the title column. Let's do modified date, modified by, and status. If there were other columns on the model or default columns you wanted to show, like if you're using scheduling, you could add those here as well. When you have embedded views of lists, we don't allow the user to personalize that as much as looking at lists that are in the content area. Whoever's setting up the content model sets those up. We have some options for sorting, which I'm not going to go through right now, but we're going to use the default sort for this list. Here we go. So we've got our list of items that's on here. We might want to have a heading on this thing too. So let's add a text field for the heading. Probably makes sense. Here we go. All right. So now this is all ready. So having created a page module, which is going to render using some kind of component, let's go to our pages section and let's actually add this to a page. Let's put our image carousel on our home page. Let's do it. So we're going to click add module, which will show the list of module components here. And you can see we've got our image carousel, which is now available. Let's go and put that right at the top. So as this gets added, what's going to happen is when I open this, I can immediately edit my heading field that was on there. All right, so this is, my images. But I have to save this to create that nested linked content. Okay, so until I save it, that list doesn't exist. But as soon as I do save it, now I have this container that's available for me to create items into. This container does not exist in the content area. It only exists underneath this image carousel on this module component. Now, you can create nested content for items that are in the content area. Of course, you can do that as well. The same modeling rules apply for module components as they do for any regular piece of content in a model, okay? So let's go ahead and create some items onto here. And I don't have a whole lot of content to do here, so we're just going to call this item 1. Let's just choose an existing asset and go back to the list that we were on before. Let's go ahead and choose the person on a canoe, and we have our call to action, which we can set. So I'll go ahead and, let's just set to link to a URL, example.com. Here we go. And this is what I really like, is the save and new. I like using save and new. So we go item 2, we're gonna browse our assets. Let's choose a different image here. And this time we're gonna link to the agility homepage. Here we go. Agility. Ooh, and I learned to spell. Here we go. All right. So save and close. So now I've got 2 items that were added to this list, which should show up in a second here. Here we go. We got item 1 and item 2 that are now underneath my nested into this image carousel. So this list is actually contained by this image carousel, which is on this page. So that's an example of how to do nested content, and we've also showed how to do linked content to other containers that are shared within the content area. And hopefully that clears up how content relationships work in Agility.